Okay, we're back, and this time we're looking at Culture Shock, and it's another five faction expansion, but unlike what were you thinking, we decided just to make this an 8 card event rather than a 16 card event, partly for some of the cards, but also because we don't want to include too many cards that just realistically can't win, even though we just want to give them some credit and some airtime. So we're down to eight slots, five factions. So there is one faction that isn't represented in terms of a second pick. No, there's two factions that don't have two second picks. So without further ado, we'll just get straight into it. And we've got Toad for Russian Fairy Tales up against Rumpelstiltskin for
What
Grimm's Fairy Tales.
what did we end up cutting just for the viewers? Azebo the leopard and
Yeah, we cut a Sabo, and well, we were tied, weren't we, between Birchwoman and another card. And we decided we'll just get rid of both of them.
I can't remember which one made it through instead of Birchwoman. I know there was a bit of a discussion.
Yeah, the Water of Life.
Oh yeah, and I didn't want either of them, to be honest. I wanted his Grey Wolf, so we just get rid of them all.
Yeah,
yeah. Okay, so we do have one representative, the Toad. So who thinks Rumpelstiltskin should be going through?
Well, I'll go first because I put Rumpelstiltskin number one in his faction. So I do. I think this minion's talent on playability is immensely strong. You're basically guaranteeing to draw into it next turn, or when you're playing with the rest of your faction, potential to draw into it this turn. But to be able to searching for cards is quite a limited action in this game. It doesn't feel as common as some of the other mechanics. So I think it's few and far between. And anytime you can go and get a card, not a minion and not an action, not anything, a card, it's immensely strong. You put it on your top of your deck, okay, it's marginally worse than putting it in your hand, but it's an immensely strong action. I do like Toad because you're basically countering everything I try and do in this game, which is build up a powerful first mate to 20 power, body shop him until he's as much as he can possibly be, and you're just going to shuffle it back into my deck and just essentially kill my entire game. So I respect Toad for what he does there, but I think Rumpelstiltskin is better because you can guarantee to get that vital card in any one moment, or the card that makes your combination run.
Do you want to go last, Lee, so you can decide it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go now, and you can.
Right.
You can, unless you want to tell me why you're going to pick Toad, because I think you are going to pick Toad.
I'm picking Toad. Yeah.
Yeah, and do you know what? So am I as well. I think it's so uniquely different to a lot of other cards that are there. I also think it's massively underrated as a card. I think a lot of people just think of it as it's a pretty terrible card. Actually, I'll be perfectly honest. This expansion was massively disappointing for me. I was quite excited about getting to grips with a load of different styles of card, and I just think that they've gone way too far the other way. After what we're talking about, literally in our video, in our last video, where we're talking about Munchkin and we're talking about how much fun it was. Whenever I play any of these factions, I'm reminded how boring some factions can be. So overthinky. Don't get me wrong, I'm a physicist. I like to think about lots of different things, but I do not enjoy having to try to unpick the best ways to play these factions. That's not to say that they aren't good, because they very much are, and in different ways. I know, is it Grimm's that everybody seems to rave over? I'm not interested in playing any of them in any sort of way, shape, or form. So my sort of generalized strength of opinion, one side or another, is probably not going to shine through too much on this particular video, because quite honestly, I don't really care, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say that really, but I am saying that, and I'm going to own it as well. But Toad, I prefer Toad over Rumpelstiltskin. I agree with Luke. It's a really powerful on playability is Rumpelstiltskin, but Toad can completely derail somebody, and I think that shouldn't be overlooked.
Yeah, Rumpelstiltskin helps to sort of gel the faction together, Grimm's Fairy Tales, because they need specific cards at the right time. And that's part of the problem when you play in pairs. You have to have the right cards at the right time, and Rumpelstiltskin just helps to smooth it out. But you don't get it until the next turn, which it's a strong ability, but you have to wait a turn to then actually cash in on it. I imagine the situation, you play Rumpelstiltskin and then someone just plays a Shield Maiden and just takes the card from the top of the deck and puts it into their hand. That would be disastrous.
That would be funny. I would like that.
Super Spies or something like that and discard the top card. But for me, Toad is just hard removal. It's a very, very good removal card. If there's a problematic minion on the board, you play Toad, you give it to the other player, you shuffle in their problematic card, and then you can just use your Russian Fairy Tales, Baba Yaga or whatever she's called, and some of the actions to shuffle Toad back in and do it all over again. So it's an incredibly effective removal card that adds no power to the base. There's no power creep there, and you can just keep on using it over and over again because that's what the Russian Fairy Tales do. So yeah, for me, it's a comfortable Toad win.
Fine. I do like the look of the Toad. I think it's a wonderful piece of art.
Clever.
Now we've got two excellent minions here. So who wants to kick us off on this one?
It's interesting. I think I know roughly which way you two are going to go, so I'm going to go.
Really?
First, if that's okay. Yeah, I think it should go me, then Lee, and then Matt to finish.
Okay.
If I've pegged it right, and I don't know if I have, but if I pegged it right, Wayfinder for me. I'm not a huge fan of movement because I think it often doesn't necessarily have a purpose. But in this sense, you are moving every turn to gain power, and that's a guaranteed 1 power every turn. And it's not really that different to something like Heo Doctor in the Mad Scientist, which is distribute. Okay, yeah, she can't give it to anyone. It goes on her, but you're gaining 1 power counter every turn. And I love that. I think that's powerful. I think she's a sneaky level of powerful. That means you're probably not too worried about her.
Oh, he's back.
We lost your camera for a second there, Luke.
It's a sneaky level of power, which means you sort of, all of a sudden, she could very easily be 7 power or something like that. Not to say Saperinka isn't good. He has a similar effect in gaining one of the power counters. But I just prefer Wayfinder. I think the Incas, I know their whole point is to play base actions and they do it well, but I just don't love that mechanic. I think it's very easy to play them with a faction that has base actions and think, okay, great, I'll play twice as many base actions, but it doesn't necessarily benefit you that much. It's quite weird. So I prefer Wayfinder. I'm not sure she's necessarily that much better, but I definitely prefer her.
Wayfinder for me, interestingly enough. I like some base action plays, but Saperinka is, again, out of the two of them, and I think Luke hit on a point that is really important for me in this particular argument, in this particular discussion, this particular set. Wayfinder is better because it's finally movement with a purpose. And this is how I think movement should be done all of the time. It shouldn't be just move for movement's sake, like tornadoes or like sheep. Move for movement's sake, flock things to one sort of base or another. This is move to gain power, and I'm all for doing something to gain something as a result of it. Too often you're finding that you're going to do too much, like the Wizards, for example. You end up playing loads of actions but don't really do anything with it. Super Spies, you combine them with someone like Vikings, for example, you end up doing loads but don't actually get anything from it. I'm all for movement and gaining something for it. Saperinka, reasonably powerful card. I think suffers from Monarch Fever. We're still in the first rounds on this one today. Suffers from Monarch Fever. It's, again, strength within its own faction. But I guess it does pair out a little bit more. But I think what the Incas kind of suffer from is, just like Luke said, often you want to pair them with a faction that has lots of base actions, but then don't ever really get a chance to capitalize on that. So every time I've played them, I've always just been let down. I've just been felt let down a little bit by them. But I'm not really one for choosing the Moana style faction. It's not really my thing either. In fact, none of these are. I've said that already. But out of these two cards, Wayfinder's better for me.
I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that you want to pair Incas with a playing base faction, because the Ancient Incas have so many good play-on-base actions anyway. You don't really need any more. Okay, you can play into another one and the combo will be even stronger, but they are a very, very strong isolated faction where it doesn't necessarily need that kind of external help. And they are my favorite faction. And Sapper Inca is a big part of that. You're not often using unplayability to search your deck. You're more likely to use it for the discard pile to get a strong action back. And you have to think of the ongoing ability like a Odysseus Light, because you are getting a fair few power counters and it just helps you to edge out. Getting power without playing minions is a great advantage. But for me, and I don't know if Luke predicted this, but for me, it's a Wayfinder win because it's such a clean minion. It's like a phase 2 first mate where you're playing your first mate and you just move from base to base, increasing power, and then eventually have a big Wayfinder that can just break a base solo. So for me in this matchup, it's Wayfinder, but I do greatly appreciate Sapper Inca, especially in some combination with something like Golden Condor, where you can, really maximize the value of the card. But Wayfinder is just such a clean, powerful minion.
It's interesting because I called in my head. I had Lee wanting Sapper Inca, you wanting Wayfinder, and that's what I was sort of going for. But it's nice to see her get a clean sweep. Actually,
it's just so good. It's such a good powerful minion.
It's also interesting. Can I just double check? Ancient Incas are your favorite faction.
Yeah.
Full stop. Not top 3, not top 4, top 5. Favorite.
Certainly right now.
Okay.
Where are you going with this? I don't know. But...
Good, lovely political answer there.
Why do you?
No, just curious. I don't have a single favorite. I find it near impossible to have a single favorite. So I'm impressed that you do.
Do you want to stop now? Do you want to stop now, or do you want to do one more?
One more.
I can keep going. Yeah.
Okay.
I've said I'm going to be 5 minutes late anyway, so we'll probably get through these next 2.
So next round, then we've got Big Bad Wolf, who is the number 1 seed for Grims, up against the number 2 seed Sun Tattoo for Polynesian Voyagers. We'll flip the order this time. I'll go first, Lee, and then Luke. For me, it's Sun Tattoo. It is a ridiculously good card, and the fact that it came in second, I suppose, kind of tells you how good Wayfinder is. We talked about Deep Fryer yesterday being the when a base breaks, you can save a minion. This is the same sort of effect, but you gain 2 power from it as well. So if you've got a buffed up Wayfinder, the restriction about having no previous actions played on it isn't really that detrimental. You just make sure that if your target minion doesn't have any actions on it going in, and then you've got 2 copies of Sun Tattoo, you keep them in hand ready, save your Wayfinder, break another base from it. It's just an excellent special. And you'll never play this in phase 2. You'll always play as a special. Big Bad Wolf is very good. The condition, again, Red Riding Hood being in play probably isn't that restrictive because it's all about timing and choosing when to play your specific minions. Destroying a power 4 minion or less is great. There's not many cards that can destroy a power 4 minion for less, and that's very strong. The ongoing is incredibly niche because unless it's like Ninja Master or something like that, Assassination, it's almost it's very unlikely a Big Bad Wolf will be able to be destroyed. So you're only really doing that to yourself with the Woodsman's Axe. But if you do that with yourself, it's a great effect. But realistically, that's a bit of an internal synergy combo there. So for this purpose of this video, I suppose it's quite a niche ongoing ability. So for me, it's Sun Tattoo all day long.
Same for me. You've made the argument really well there, Mark. I don't need to add anything to it. Ultimately, just look at the stupid number of lines of text on these cards, on all of these cards. Like, why does it have to be so long-winded? It's like, hang on, boys, let's play a quick game of Smash Up. I hope you brought your reading spectacles because we're going to be here for 25 years just reading the cards. No, it shouldn't be like that. It's supposed to be a game. It's supposed to be quick. It's supposed to be fun. It shouldn't be a case of reading a bloody essay every time you want to play a card down. No, I like Big Bad Wolf. I like a 6-power minion. I also like the gimmick that's involved in that faction because there's always like pairs of cards that work against one another or work for one another. And again, the gimmick is fine. I'm okay with that as a gimmick, but it is a little bit like, and I think Sharks suffered from this as well when I first started playing Sharks. There's an awful lot of cards that are doing an awful lot of things, and you have to remember an awful lot as you're playing it. And for a casual gamer, I think it's just probably a bit too much. and I think that's probably what I've got against this particular set.
Yeah.
Sun Tattoo is a much better card than Big Red Wolf.
This expansion is certainly the most complicated expansion, I'd say. And it's an interesting sort of thought experiment there, is that sort of average lines of text, the more, at the higher the average number is for an expansion, does it make it more complicated? I suppose it's quite an interesting thought.
If it needs that many words to explain itself, then what it's doing is probably too convoluted and it needs to be dumbed down.
They need to be dumbed down to sort of King Rex levels.
Well, I mean, maybe slightly higher than King Rex. What was it? Orc Lord. That was it, wasn't it?
Do nothing.
Everything gets +1. Done. Yeah. Or do. Oh, yeah. Do nothing.
Talent, do nothing.
Talent and do nothing. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
Go on then, Luke.
Make that 3 for Sun Tattoo. I'll save it.
Nice and easy.
For the next round.
Nice,
Yeah.
easy game.
If anyone's been watching the series so far, I think they could have picked that for me.
Yeah, comfortably.
I have a soft spot. I will say, while Mark's just loading the next cards up, I think it is a complicated expansion, but I think what it managed to do well is introduce some relatively new mechanics without making them bad, like dueling and madness. I think putting cards in other people's hands is something I think that is about the borderline of what you can get away without being a bit insane and a bit annoying. So it's an interesting set, and the pairs of the Grims, again, you can still play your own game and not affect everyone's game too much. So I think this is about as far as I think they should push it personally. But I do, I'm on the edge. I'm sort of in between you two in terms of what I think about it.
Yeah, you've got some straightforward factions like the Incas and Polynesian Voyagers that are more straightforward and typical smash up. Then you've got obviously Russian Fairy Tales, Grims and Anansi Tales, which are much more on the other end of the complex spectrum in terms of their play styles.
And which leads us nicely into this one. And it's interesting you mentioned the Anansi Tales as being one of the more complicated, because I think it is, but I also massively agree with what Luke's just said there. The gimmick is actually a lot more acceptable. When you compare it to something like Madness, for example, I don't really generally get a feeling of actually ever wanting to play Madness, but I want to be able to put my rubbish cards in somebody else's hand or to take their good cards out of their hand. And actually, I think that's an element of the game that I can kind of get behind. But I am going to vote for Anansi the Spider in this particular head-to-head. But I do think that there's a lot going on again with that blurb, with that text, and it's just frustrating that it has to be sort of broken down to that kind of detail. I get why, and again, it's going to almost look like I'm the stupid one of the three of us, but I don't necessarily think that's true either. But sorry, Luke.
I am. Why does that have to be a stupid one? Why can't we all be intelligent?
I just wanted to see if I can get any fish when I cast that line out today.
That does make me sound like the dumb one in the way I stuck up for that.
I've passed that book now. Anansi the Spider for me. The idea that you get to place it into somebody else's hand, and again changing a little bit of the dynamic of the game. It's nice. I like that. Extra actions, being able to disrupt other people's game plans. I'm taking Anansi the Spider of the two.
Luke?
You can go. I think you should go next, Mark. No, I don't. In fact, I can't pick. I'm trying to line this up so that we create a sort of alternative, and then there's a third way decider. But I'll go for mine. I think Anansi's better than Armory. I don't love Armory. I think you probably do. So I should have probably let you speak. But Anansi works incredibly well with the rest of the faction in that you put them in other people's hands, and then you have some other cards that when they start discarding. When they start getting rid of those cards, or they disappear, then they get penalised for it. The snake and the leopard obviously work. I think it's the snake
and the hornet as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that is the sort of damned if they do and damned if they don't. They don't want a handful of your cards, and then they give you rewards if they get rid of them. So I think Anansi is the engine for that, and I think that's why I think it's the best.
Was it our game? What did we play when? I played Anansi Tales and Pot of Beans kept getting passed around. Because Anansi Tales have loads of actions that benefit everybody. So passing Anansi Tales actions to other players is a really good benefit. I mean, I do like Ancient Incas, and Armory is one of the ways that the Incas really cheat the game in that they have a standard power structure, ways to gain power counters, and actions that will give you power. So they have, the full works to break bases. And Armour is certainly one of the big, finishing cards for doing that on one of the bases. But for me, it's probably going to be Anansi the Spider in this round anyway, to go through. But I don't think it's as good as it's good in the faction. But I don't think if you take it out of the faction, I don't think it's got the strength. Imagine playing terraforming and then giving terraforming to another player, kind of thing. It's one of those things. It's a bit of a you have to. It depends on the actions in your deck, I suppose. Is how frequently you want to be using the Anansi ability. You don't want to be giving players really good cards. So
That's the
it can be.
That's an interesting point, that actually. Would you not resolve terraforming first? Because terraforming's effect specifically says it goes to the bottom of your deck.
No, terraforming just goes to the discard pile. It's a time warp that goes to the bottom.
Time warp is what I'm thinking of. Sorry, I was thinking of time warp.
I think because it says it goes to another player's hand instead of where it would normally go. I assume that would bypass that.
The power is of being able to search your deck for any action and play it as extra action. It's so immensely powerful that the only way to balance it is to then let someone else have a go on it after you.
Yeah. Although the risk is they never play it, so you never get it. Well, I suppose you've got collecting stories for Anansi Tales, so you can get it back other ways, and you do get benefits. You mentioned Anini the Python and a Sabo and the Hornets and all that sort of stuff. You can get a lot of benefits from other players playing or discarding your cards. So it does have some other benefits. So we're picking up in the semi-finals here. So we've got Toad up against Wayfinder.
Toad.
Can I ask a question? Is there another card that gives this same effect?
As Toad?
Yeah, sorry, not quite same effect, same outcome. So I know there's like shuffle a minion of power 3 LS into you. Is there any that does uncapped any minion you want no matter what stage they are?
Yeah, so there's Dusty Henry in Vigilantes that can just shuffle a minion into their opponent's deck. And then you've got Knocked Into Next Week as well for Vigilantes, which can shuffle in. And there's other cards like, there's some power capped ones and things like that. But there's nothing that will give control of a minion and then shuffle in like the Toad does.
But what do you, other than, well, is that better than Dusty Henry? Is the point I'm trying to make. We didn't even put Dusty Henry in our list.
Well, the Vigilantes, we had the problem of which Vigilante do you put in, didn't we? Because they're all like good in different situations.
And I think that was part of the problem. In fact, I think I remember talking about that on the video where we said that I often find the Vigilantes are at a point where there's an answer to pretty much every question in the Vigilantes deck, but do you have it in your hand when you actually need it in your hand? And that's a big amount of creep that the Vigilantes always seem to suffer from, as far as I'm concerned.
I'm just proposing the thought process that does Toad feel good because it feels unique? Perhaps
what you're trying to do is trying to get us to think Wayfinder's the better card. I think that's you're trying to seed the discussion here, Luke. I will not be coerced.
I don't really have a strong allegiance to any of these cards, really. So whatever will win. It's not like Body Shop, which I love to death, or Rude Awakening. But I was just wondering, in terms of this effect, there are cards that do it better.
It's interesting though,
being that example.
Because Russian Fairy Tales can make good use of Toad, though. It's like you give Toad, and then you can shuffle in your Toad back into your deck, and then potentially play Toad again several times, and you can kind of really abuse the Toad. Just as like a standalone, just as a one-time thing, it's effectively very similar to something like Knocked Into Next Week, where you're giving them no power, so you're effectively not giving them anything. It's just simply a hard removal card. So like if you built up your big Wayfinder, then you just Toad them away. It is just there's not much that you can that can block that.
Yeah.
We don't condone Toad abuse on this YouTube channel.
Sorry. Anyway,
he's saying what on this then?
I like Toad. Toad's my secret favorite. I'm not a big I'm not going to repeat myself too much more on this, but I like Wayfinder. I like Wayfinder because it's the first of the proper movers, as far as I'm concerned. Again, it works nicely in the faction. The actual faction itself is It's okay. Moana, great TV, great film nonetheless. But Toad's unique. I like, and I know there's other things like you say like it, but again, synergizing with its own faction, and I mean, who doesn't love a Toad that is staring away from what looks like some sort of giant flaming tire wreck that it's caused? Toad for me.
Yeah, Wayfinder for me. I like creeping up power and trying to make this unstoppable monster. And it is unfortunate that on the face of what we're looking at here, Toad counters Wayfinder so brilliantly. But I'd like that to not really play into your consideration when we're deciding.
Yeah, don't think about that. Better. Don't think about that.
Yeah. I think very quickly Wayfinder can get to a point where she's the nice thing about it is you can move her around to a safe place, as you know, in theory, to safe places each time until you're ready to add her power to the base you want to break. So she can almost be playing her own game while you're still playing your actions and your minions elsewhere. You're still doing your usual turns, and every turn you're just ramping her up until that moment when you want to use her.
What I like about it is that it doesn't cost an extra turn. It's just an extra thing that you do on your turn, and I do like that about this particular card.
Yeah,
it's like a free action play.
Wayfinder is an interesting one because if you're playing a 2-player game and you've only got 3 bases, you can't really, because obviously if you're playing into Wayfinder, you have to really prioritize one base, and that's it for the rest of your stuff. So all the rest of your minion plays have to just be going onto one base, so that you can move Wayfinder between the 2 blank bases. Now the Polynesian Voyagers do have ways of adding extra bases to the game, so they can bypass that problem. But in 2 players, this card would particularly struggle. 3 and 4, it gets significantly better because you can afford to play on more bases and still have the bases free for the Wayfinder to move. So it's a bit of an interesting one in terms of player count and how it scales. But for me, it's still Wayfinder here. As good as Toad is, and it's such a solid removal card in the Russian Fairy Tales faction to get rid of all of those problematic minions. It's still Wayfinder for me just because it's so good. The turn you play it down, it's a power 5, basically. You should never be playing it down and not using the talent. And you should use the talent every single turn. And if you can play it with something like the Werewolves, where you can use the Werewolf Titan and double talent, so you just go Wayfinder to 2 bases and you go double power counters every single turn, you're going to get very powerful very quickly. So it's rare in the game that one of the lower tier minions is better than the King minion. And definitely in this case, the Wayfinder is better than the King minion in Polynesian Voyagers. So for me, it's Wayfinder.
I like that.
Respect for Toad.
Fair enough.
I should probably use Toad for the. I should probably use Toad for the thumbnail.
Yes,
it is good. Yeah,
Luke's face works well.
No, I was thinking of Hypnotoad from Futurama.
Oh yeah, nice.
Okay, on the other side of the draw then, Anansi and Sun Tattoo.
Oh, give me 25 years while I just reread all of these.
such very different cards, these 2.
Incredibly different cards, yeah. For
my
me,
gut goes with Sun Tattoo. I know I've gone twice there, but I don't care. My gut sits with Sun Tattoo for 2 reasons ultimately. Number one, it is probably more conventional as a card in terms of how Smash Up kind of works. In so much as it's just a little bit of it's a power increase, but it's more than just a power increase because it's recursion. It's more than just recursion because it's also a special. So I guess there's multiple reasons there, even though I said there was only 2. But if you call that all in there at number 1, fine. My second reason why I like that more than I like Anansi the Spider is because it works in a general theme, or it works exclusively like on its own. It doesn't need to have another set of cards with it, or like Anansi, it works better because as he gives cards away, gains more power from those cards being sort of passed away, discarded, used, or what have you, a little bit later on. So it's a bit more standalone. It doesn't require the rest of the faction to work with it. And again, in the context of this particular series that we've been having these discussions on, we've been looking at other cards that suffer from that problem that require the rest of the deck to be able to make these cards powerful. Sun Tattoo doesn't do that, which is why I prefer Sun Tattoo over the two.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think Anansi is very good. Anansi the Spider is very good in Anansi Tales. And it's also, it does translate quite well across into just like standalone. You could drop it into any faction, and a lot of factions would appreciate what Anansi can bring. But then the issue is that, yes, you can access your best actions quickly, but then you're also giving your opponent an opportunity to play those best actions, which I feel is maybe a little bit uncomfortable with doing that, and especially putting it onto like what's the best card in Smash Up. I don't know whether that necessarily would play very strongly into my kind of thoughts for promoting Anansi the Spider here, because yes, you can access them quickly, yes, you get the free play every turn, but then you can't necessarily play that action again, so you have to make sure that you time it so that if you're playing 2 copies of it, that's the second copy you play. But then also as well, if you search for your strongest thing, then your opponents are going to have a chance to play your strongest thing as well, and you don't necessarily want to have that happen. Like terraforming, crop circles, stuff like that, you don't want to be giving those cards to other players. And even if you retrieve them in future turns, like collecting stories and whatever, you can't play it again this turn, so you can't necessarily do that immediately, so that they do get a chance to do it. Whereas Sun Tattoo, you know, we've talked previously about cards like Deep Fryer and other ones like that, where you save a minion after the base scores. And not only does it do that, but you also give it +2 power, so it's just a nice little sweet bonus on top of it. And, you know, we've got the minion on the other side that you want to play in this onto. So I think Sun Tattoo is just really, you know, it's a very clean, very powerful card and special that you can play into, you know, your strongest stuff and keep that around. Yeah, you can play it onto your Anansi and keep your Anansi around longer, that sort of thing. So for me, it's probably Sun Tattoo as well.
That's three Sun Tattoos, please.
Is this a double Wayfinder final?
Apologies. Just quickly before we move off Anansi, you can keep doing the jigging. But the interesting thing about Anansi, what you're saying there, is do you want to give your cards, your strongest cards, to your opponent? Now, I think it depends how strong your strongest cards are, because you are getting to play them A first and B as extra. So in theory, you've got your normal turn plus that on top, whereas they would have to use their action play, or then, you know, they'd have to use their action play to use that card that you've just used. And if they're using your cards, they're not using their own. So I think there's a scenario where, let's say you're playing against someone who's got better actions than you do. They might not want to play yours, but it might still be your strongest action, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're playing 2 actions that will be better than their 1 action, but there's a scenario where you're giving them a card that is worse than what they would play anyway. Depends how strong your actions are in every faction and how strong. If you're playing against aliens, they're not going to use one of your actions over one of theirs necessarily, because they're going to be picking up the invader and things like that. So
it depends. It depends, though, isn't it? That's part of the fun with actions, is that it's all very dependent on the situation, isn't it? Yeah, you can play your own game to a certain extent, but actions allow you to be able to disrupt or play into other people's games a little bit as well. And so giving people access to more actions is never going to be a good thing, in my opinion. Having more choice is always better. That's why draw works so well and movement sucks so much.
And Anansi Tales have incredible actions to give to other players. Like, their actions are pretty average, like pot of beans and all that sort of stuff, but they're great for other players to play as well, because they generally offer benefits to everybody. So they're great actions to give away. And I get what you're saying in terms of, you know, you get it as an extra play, you can search for it and draw it, you know, like you're terraforming. Your opponents effectively have 1 turn to play it, because your following turn, you should probably be playing collecting stories to then take the action back off them and play it as an extra action again. So they probably will play it in that window. And I get what you're saying, that you're going to play it at a time that benefits you, but, you know, they might not have an opportunity for them to benefit from it before you take it back. So yeah, it is better than I've necessarily, you know, given credit for, but it's a very solid card. But I just think Sun Tattoo is a, you know, more powerful sort of immediate effect that can, you know, actually double base breaking card, basically. So talking about double base breaking card, we've got Wayfinder, and then the card that you want to attach we've got Sun Tattoo and Wayfinder, which is the card that you want to attach Sun Tattoo to, really. So what's
What
better,
a final.
breaking the first base or breaking the second base?
Is this the first time
Okay.
this has happened, by the way, when we were, since we've been doing this? Is it the first time that we've had two cards from the same faction go against each other in the final?
I think so.
It potentially would have happened when we did the base set. We didn't line the factions up.
Yeah,
on
it wasn't lined
sides,
up properly then. Yeah,
it potentially could have happened in there with Terraforming and Invader, but I think probably.
Yeah, in core set we did
to me
have the
that's
final, didn't we? With
speaks
Terraforming
volumes,
and
doesn't it?
Invader.
Speaks volumes just to how rubbish the rest of the set is.
Oh, how good the Voyages
How
are.
good these cards are, yeah.
You can't say the Voyages are good. These cards are good.
Okay, these
two
cards
cards are very good.
No, but there was two or three other cards that were in strong consideration for me. I think there's one that
Unity of the Tribe for me.
Shark Tattoo has a similar.
Yeah, Shark Tattoos, you can move them around and add a power counter and things like that. So
yeah,
like your Aruba Serum style card.
That gives you like Wayfarer's ability pretty much. But yeah, there was 4 or 5 good cards in this set that I struggled to narrow it down a little bit. But for me, this is close, but I'm going to take the card that can make any card into a first mate, and I'm going to go Sun Tattoo. If that wasn't easy to pick, it's Sun Tattoo for me. It's first mate plus 2 power, and that speeds that up. And potentially you could put it on something and then body shop it later and keep it around. And I mean, body shop works well with Wayfarer, so I don't know if that helps my argument. But I'm going to go with Sun Tattoo because it has a lot of universal. It's very universal. It works with keeping minions out. I like to build up something strong like a Wayfinder and then keep it around. But there are more cards that can add power counters than there are cards that can keep themselves around after a base scores. Or I prefer that effect.
You can't attach it to your card that's got Eternal Hero attached to.
Yeah.
You can't keep that around.
Yeah.
So I think that is worth considering. I mean, I'll go next now. I'll let Lee choose the winner on this final. But for me, it's Wayfinder, just because I think it's one of the strongest Power 4 minion. Well, it probably is the strongest Power 4 minion in the game that isn't the king minion of the faction. So like Felicia Day and Will Wheaton, they're the king minions. So for me, it's such an incredibly powerful minion. It will very quickly grow to, Spartan level 10 plus power very quickly. You slap you probably want to save it for the Sun Tattoo, but you can attach the Shark Tattoo and you can increase the power even faster. And you will be breaking one base just off the back of your Wayfinder. And a single minion that can do, a base break fairly quickly is just incredible value. And I like Sun Tattoo. I think it's a very good special. It's one of the better specials for playing after a base and preserving a minion. But I just think, the ideal target would be something like Wayfinder, and that's just because Wayfinder is so unbelievably strong. So I think for me, it's Wayfinder just because it has that movement, so you can never be stuck. You can always go to a target base, like example of Ice Castle, where you can't play a minion on there, you have to move there. So it's always versatile. If you're ever in danger, you just move off to another base, and every time you move, you get a benefit for it. So it's happy days for me. So it's going for Wayfinder.
Interesting. It kind of it's an interesting debate to have in terms of the final, and it is weird to see again the different play styles start coming out again. I actually thought Luke would have gone for Wayfinder of the two, but I guess it speaks volumes that both cards are actually very, very good cards. And actually, I don't really mind which of the two wins. And it's interesting that I've got the final vote. Perhaps I should have had the first say, and that way it wouldn't necessarily have made much of a difference. But yeah,
I'm happy with either of these.
Yeah, I am kind of torn. I'm not. I would agree. It's top 3 of the Power 4 minions. I don't know if I could definitely say without a few of the other ones in front of me that it was the best, but it's definitely top 3. What I really like is that it's so easy to use. That's what's kind of drawing me a little bit more towards Wayfinder. I just think that there may be a time where you'd want to save something with your Sun Tattoo, but you may have been forced to play an action or something down on it. And I think that limiting factor, albeit a very small limiting factor, but that limiting factor is what's making me lean a little bit more towards Wayfinder as the 2. What is interesting, though, is that I think out of the 2 cards, Sun Tattoo's probably got a better chance of going further in the Champion of Champions tournament. I don't think Wayfinder's going to go any further than the standard phase. Maybe not. Yeah, maybe not.
I think that's a good point you mentioned there about the limitation, because obviously things like Luchadors, fairies, factions like that can actually play actions onto your minions, and they want to be doing that. So you could end up with a situation where you want to play Sun Tattoo, but someone's actually just blocked you by playing an action down onto your own minions.
Set up action or something.
Yeah,
and that's where I think Kappa Roja is probably in the consideration for the best of the Power 4s, but still.
True, yeah, Kappa Roja, yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I come down on it, and I would probably say Kappa Roja is as good, if not a little bit better than Wayfinder. So that's what makes me think it didn't even win its own faction, didn't even win its own set. It was beaten out by Yokozuna. So that makes me think that Wayfinder's gone about as far as it can possibly go, and maybe Sun Tattoo should probably win. So I'm kind of going around that argument in my head as a case of which one do I want to really fully settle on. Again, I'm sort of 50-50 on this, and I don't really have a particularly strong opinion one way or the next. Again, and I think that speaks to my lack of experience playing this particular set. I think I've only really played 2 games with the cards from these, or 2 or 3 games really with the cards from this set. So, and I don't think I've ever played with the Polynesian Voyagers either. So. Mm-hmm. I've not really been in a situation where I can kind of use my own experiences to see where it would fit on. I'm leaning more towards Wayfinder than Sun Tattoo because I think it's the easier of the 2 to use. I think it's got less chance of being bullied. That's the other argument I wanted to make. It's very difficult to get rid of a Power 5 minion because obviously, like you say, Mark, when you play it down, you move it straight away. So you're not playing this as a Power 4, really. You're playing this as a Power 5. So it's very difficult to get rid of a Power 5 minion. As soon as it starts to become a Power 5, there's less cards in the game which are going to let you shuffle things in. You know, Toad, for example, Wayfinder. But yeah, it's probably going to be Wayfinder than Sun Tattoo.
Just to kind of add to that, this is the first time I think any of us have mentioned this, but there's something about being able to play something straight away. So if you've got an opening hand, for example, there's a value and a benefit to being able to just play a card straight away onto the board. And like Wayfinder, you can just play straight away, and there's no downside to doing that. You couldn't necessarily play your Sun Tattoo straight away. You couldn't necessarily play some of your other cards. Some of the stuff we put through to the champions, you couldn't just play immediately. So I think there is a value to having something that can just be played, and it doesn't need any consideration about timing or anything like that. It's just a good play at any point.
It's a really good point, actually. One that I'd not considered at all. And you're absolutely right. A lot of the things that we put through actually favour being held until the absolute best possible moment before you play them. And Wayfinder isn't that at all. It's nice, actually, to have a good card that is good to be played. It wants you to sort of get it down. In fact, you want to get it down early because you want to start powering it up through as many turns as you can do before you need to break a base individually. And that's where when you start coming up against some of those bases where it's very difficult to be able to play a minion onto it, but you can move a minion onto it. Actually, a faction like this that benefits from moving, it's a 2 Wayfinders in the deck. There isn't there? There's 2 Wayfinders.
2 Sun Tattoos as well.
Well, there you go. So two good choices of cards.
Let me propose a scenario for you here. So I think, and I'm going to use both these cards as the argument, but I think Sun Tattoo. Let's say you get a Wayfinder up to 7 or 8, you break a base, you then use Sun Tattoo to make it a 9 and carry on going. There's an unstoppability factor there that allows you to basically end up with 2 power 8 or 9 or whatever beyond. I think that comes from Sun Tattoo. and I think it works particularly well with Wayfinder. But being able to keep a minion out that you've ranked up a Spartan or anything that you've powered up, or your body shot play, or I suppose your first mates do it anyway, don't they? But taking a power 5 minion and ramping it up, even keeping stuff in like Yokozuna out there, or think of all the king minions out there that you'd love to have around a second time, and then add 2 power to them. Think of a Great Worm with a +2 power and taking 2 VPs off someone twice. So it's just another chip for Suntatsu again. But
I don't disagree. I completely agree with that.
Yeah,
and
same.
That's the whole point about with these two. Do you value breaking the first base or the second base? Because Wayfinder breaks the first one and Suntatsu lets you break the second. So it's kind of like, well, it's so hard to distinguish between the two of them, because exactly you play Suntatsu onto Wayfinder. So which is the better card? Is it Suntatsu or Wayfinder? So it's a really tricky question to answer.
Not wanting to make this a very long conversation, but to me, that's where Luke and I often differ on the idea of Body Shop being a really good card. Because Body Shop shouldn't do what it does. It does what it does because another card stops you from being able to destroy the minion in the first place. That means the other card is better, in my opinion, than Body Shop. So, and we end up going round and round and round in this argument, because I'll never agree with you and you'll never agree with me.
Fine.
So
I'm fine if
that's
we decide.
Exactly. It's what's better. Is the engine or the payoff better? And it's kind of like, well, how do you?
But
you would never have the payoff if it weren't for the engine, but you'd never have the payoff.
Do I want to break?
Engine,
do I want to break one base, or do I want to break 2? And that's where Suntatsu, I think, comes into it. I think for me, the thing that makes me lean a little bit more towards Wayfinder rather than Suntatsu, and I'm not taking anything away from either card, is that if someone has played a setup action on my Wayfinder, I can't play a Suntatsu. Or if I have had to play a card or an action on Wayfinder, then I'm not going to be able to use the Suntatsu. If for example, I'm playing my my Warriors card onto Wayfinder to prevent my Eternal Hero card to prevent it from going to the discard pile, I'd rather play Wayfinder again than get another Suntatsu. Well, maybe that's not true.
I suppose
that's not true.
A good way to think about it maybe would be if you were to create a list of, if you were building your own faction and you had to do a short list of second tier minions, so not your king minion, but your minion below it, is Wayfinder likely to make that list? And then if you had to shortlist a spot in your faction for a special after the base scores special, basically, is Suntatsu likely to make your shortlist? And for me, Wayfinder would make my top 5 power 4 minions, but Suntatsu wouldn't make my it maybe make like scraped in 4 or 5 maybe, but it wouldn't be as high up in the rankings as Wayfinder would be in the power 4s, as Suntatsu would be in my after the base scores specials.
I don't know. It might be for me. I don't know. It might be for me. I guess
I'd say them both.
That's the debate. Yeah, I don't think I could split hairs. I think I'd be happy with either. I think I'm going to stick with my gut, and I'm going to lean Wayfinder slightly because I think it's easier to use and it has less condition attached to it. So Wayfinder.
Okay.
Cool. Happy.
Wayfinder it is. Very solid card, I think. They both are very solid cards. So for the 3 of us, we actually now have our final 16, but for the people watching, there's still Awesome Love 9000 to come. So no spoilers ahead. And then we're done on the 16. The 16 expansions and sets. So we'll just have after that. We'll have after Awesome Love 9000. We've got the draw, and then we're going to have we're going to do worst card in Smash Up first, so we can do some community polling, and then we're going to do best card, the Champion of Champions, and Wayfinder may well have its day, or may not.
Flop in the opening round.
Straight up against Valkyrie. Straight out. Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.